Good morning, intro to art. So unfortunately, I am not here. I had gotten served with a jury duty summons a couple weeks ago. Matter of fact, I think it was around Thanksgiving break, and I just called a couple minutes ago, and I have to come in. By the time you guys are watching this, I will be sitting probably at a courtroom waiting to hear whether or not I have to do my civic duty. I hope that this goes well for me and for you guys. But knowing that I'm not in today, I wanted to kind of touch base as to what you guys were going to be working on for your 1 point perspective project. As you can see on the screen here, I've made a presentation and it's actually going to be linked directly below this video. And you guys can scroll through that to see some of the interesting things, purpose, requirements, and things like that, due dates and everything. But before I got into it and went over stuff, because I think it's pretty much straightforward, I think you guys mainly know the majority of what it is you guys need to do. I wanted to touch base with you guys and give you some feedback and some criticisms on your sketchbook challenge from last week, because that is sort of like a starting point for where you're going to go with for this project in its entirety. Now, keeping with the theme of the 1 point perspective drawing that you guys are going to be working on, I had you guys finish a look of the classroom. And here are a few submissions. Matter of fact, this is not even actually a submission up here, but I have a few submissions that came in, and I wanted not to poke fun at anybody, but I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about some of the good things that were happening, some of the things that I was seeing, and some of the things that need to get a little work on. So before you guys start this, you guys can kind of compare where your skills are at and what it is you need to kind of pay attention to. I saw a number of different things happening. First of all, the image that's over here on the left-hand side is a 1 point perspective drawing, just like the one over here is a 1 point perspective on the right. But the one on the right actually solves all the issues of perspective drawing in shapes and forms correctly, while the one over here on the left, where my mouse is, leaves a lot of questions to be answered. For example, let's take a look at probably what's the most obvious. Let's take a look at, for example, these tables, right? I asked you guys to draw 3 tables, and I really didn't care about their placement or their original shape or size of the tables as long as they had legs. And you can see here on the right side of the screen, the tables have a thickness to them. They start off with this little rectangle, horizontal rectangle, and then they follow diagonal lines back to the vanishing point. Matter of fact, if you look really closely, you can kind of see where some of those lines actually erase. Same thing with the books, and mostly everything else. Here's another table right here. Looks pretty good. Now, if you take a look over here at the image on the left, they have diagonal lines, and it looks as though they are going to the vanishing point. But there's something really interesting between all of these desks. First of all, if I zoom in, don't these look pretty paper thin? What I mean by that is if you were to actually set something on the surface of this desk or any of the two, it would fall apart because this desk doesn't have necessarily a thickness to it. Whereas if you look over here, there is a thickness, right? The other thing, if you look at these lines for legs, these legs are just like little sticks. There's really no dimension at all. It's a line, but we don't follow any more rules like construction lines going backwards to the vanishing point. And I would argue that whoever drew this, or the people that have drawn images like this, because it's not just one person, it was a collection of a lot of people, I would argue that that sort of information is understood, but I don't understand why it's not reciprocated down here, why it's not done for things like the legs or the table itself. Another thing that I found that was a common theme is diagonal lines that went all over the place. For example, here in this image, there's a diagonal line that kind of maps itself all the way up to the vanishing point here, but then there's another diagonal line that shoots off over here to a side, which doesn't really make sense because there's not a point over there. The diagonal lines over here on this far table, they kind of go off, but they never ever really get into the vicinity of that point right there. And I would argue that you guys know where this goes, but I think the problem is that you're not really sure whether it's correct or not, because it makes the table size look a little funny. And if I go back to this image over here, while the tables don't necessarily look identical, they are drawn in the proper perspective. So this is something that I think a lot of you guys need to pay attention to. Those of you guys doing it correctly, and those of you that are doing it incorrectly, missing some things. Here's another submission over here that I thought was really, really good. As you can see, you've got the heat register that's on the floor. I would have liked to see this maybe bumped a little bit closer to the side of the wall, but I mean, that's something that's easily manageable. I can see the diagonal lines onto all the tables, and the book right here, this is done really, really well. But if I zoom out of this one, I'll minimize that, and I'll go back over. Oh, here's one. I'll go and check this one out. You can see there's some issues with the tables. Now these tables here actually solve the thickness issue, but if I trace the vanishing or the construction lines to a vanishing point, they're all going all over the place. Matter of fact, some of the tables actually get wider as they get further away from you instead of getting skinnier as they go away from you. And this is an issue that I think a lot of you guys had problems solving because, well, they just didn't fit on the piece of paper that you guys were working with, which doesn't mean necessarily that you can't do it. It just means that maybe you need to draw some things a little bit smaller in their overall shape or size. Now, keeping with that theme, and I know that I'm not in, I wanted to spend some time talking to you guys about the actual project here and make sure that you guys have all the necessary information that you need to be successful. Now, I'm not going to kind of read through every one of these slides because it is my goal and it is my intentions to keep this video somewhat relatively short, but here you can read the overall purpose as to what it is you guys are going to do. And I think probably what's the most important to you guys is the requirements. The requirements are fairly straightforward. If you look at this in blue, I just kind of typed out the headlines as to what it is you need to be keying in on. For example, rule number 1 or requirement number 1, all 1-point perspective rules are followed. So like, for example, I can bring up this one, and when I look at this, I mean, there's vertical lines that are vertical, but then there's this little leg over here that I wouldn't necessarily say it's vertical. It's kind of like it doesn't know whether it wants to be vertical or what. Horizontal lines seem to be running horizontal. I don't know if this was just a mistake on the way that the person tilted their head or anything, but diagonal lines should be going to the vanishing point. Now, I don't see a vanishing point on this drawing anywhere, but for me to kind of figure this out, I just put the ruler or the straight edge on there and make sure they're all running to the same direction. What I would kind of argue here is it just looks like this person didn't know what type of line to draw to end these tables, but then when I look at the way that they drew this square over here, I would say, well, you knew to draw the line going horizontal here, so why not just draw the line horizontal down there for the end of the table? Regardless, these are the types of rules that I'm referring to for requirement number 1. Now, requirement number 2 says draw what you can see. Meaning, if you take a photograph of this 1-point perspective somewhere in the school, if you can see it, then you need to draw it. If it's present in your photograph, then you need to draw it. Here's a photograph that I had gotten submitted last year, and as you can see, it's a 1-point perspective. You can follow the diagonal lines from the tops of the lockers or the bottom of the floors. You can follow the diagonal lines from the ceiling tile that gets made up, and as you move your eye backwards, even those little bathroom signs start to get smaller as they get further away from you. So everything that's in this image I require to be drawn. Now, I'm not talking about these little trophies in the back, but I am talking about the trophy case. If this is a clock or a watch up on the probably wouldn't be a watch, but it would be a clock or maybe a speaker for our announcement system back over here. I think that needs to be drawn as well, additionally with the little grate of heat or something. Now, people in the background, those don't necessarily need to get drawn, but I do think you guys need to pay attention to some of the details, and if it does pop up in your image, then you need to draw it. Now, requirement number 3, not just a bunch of lines, refers to you making sure that you clean up any of the leftover construction lines that you have. Don't turn this into me with a whole bunch of construction lines going all over the place and expect me to figure it out. You guys are drawing and you guys are proving that you understand how this works. So my goal here is that you also know which parts of the construction lines you need to erase and which ones you need to hold on to. Now, just like every project, I have 4 requirements and there's only 3 on the screen, and I saved the 4th one kind of because it was the most important. As you can see, there's an image there that I just shown you, and then below here is the drawing that was submitted. Upon turning this in at the end of this week, Friday, you guys will also have to submit to me your photograph. You will have to have this photograph printed, and hopefully I will be able to do that and offer that service to you guys when I come back from my jury summons. But you will have to have a printed photograph of your hallway view, or somewhere around the school, accompanying your drawing, basically serving as your answer key. So if you took a picture of something down one of the hallways, you turn it in, and then I have the ability to go and look at that and grade whether or not you followed the lines, followed the rules, got rid of things that you don't need, kept things that you do need. Now, this assignment is fairly quick. Matter of fact, unlike your other assignments here that we were working on, you're only going to get about 5 days for this. So I want to make sure that you guys use the best amount of time as possible. As you can see, December 7th, this Friday, is the deadline for this. So I want to make sure that I don't take up too much time for you guys, but hold on to any questions that you might have for when I return. I think the assignment is fairly straightforward, though, since you guys have been drawing in 1-point perspective. Just follow the same rules that you've been learning. Since you've already done one here for a sketchbook last week, it's going to be sort of the same thing. The only difference here is you're taking a photograph outside of the classroom. You're going to be keeping some of the information but erasing most of your construction lines, and you have to have a document, or sorry, you have to have a photograph that accompanies it as well. So I'm going to sign off from here. I'm going to recommend you guys to check out the presentation that's directly below this, and make sure that you guys do kind of take a look at some of the examples of good for 1-point perspective drawings and poor 1-point perspective drawings, and familiarize yourselves with some of the issues that people had. And save and hold on to any of your questions that you might have. You can always email me. I will hopefully be able to answer those emails later on in the evening. And hopefully I'll expect to be back Tuesday to run through things for you guys. All right. So I'm going to sign off here and say good luck. Bye.